Hi friends, welcome back for the next chapter. I'm so glad you're joining me again. This is chapter 9 today, and we are reading Wilbur's boast. Boast is a great word. Boast is kind of another way of saying brag. A claim that you can do something. Okay, so Wilbur's going to claim he can do something today. And we're going to have a little fun seeing how he does with that boast that he makes. A spider's web is stronger than it looks. Although it's made of thin, delicate strands, a web is not easily broken. Have you ever broken spider webs before? Sometimes they're really sticky and they're hard to get down. So, I can understand how that's true. However, a web gets torn every day by the insects that kick around in it, so a spider must rebuild it when it gets full of holes. Charlotte liked to do her weaving during the late afternoon, and Fern liked to sit nearby and watch. One afternoon she heard a most interesting conversation and witnessed a strange event. "You have awfully hairy legs, Charlotte," said Wilbur, as the spider busily worked at her task. "My legs are hairy for a good reason," replied Charlotte. "Furthermore, each leg of mine has 7 sections. Oh boy, these are going to be some tricky words. Let's see how I do. The coxa, the trochanter, the femur, the patella, the tibia, the metatarsus, and the tarsus. Those are a whole lot of science words. You study biology, you'll hear those words. Wilbur sat bolted upright. "You're kidding," he said. "No, I'm not either. Say those names again. I didn't catch them the first time." The coxa, trochanter, femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, and tarsus. "Goodness," said Wilbur, looking down at his own chubby legs. "I don't think my legs have 7 sections." "Well," said Charlotte, "you and I lead very different lives. You don't have to spin a web. It takes real leg work." "I could spin a web if I tried," said Wilbur, boasting. "I've just never tried it." "Let's see you do it," said Charlotte. Fern chuckled softly. Her eyes grew wide with love for the pig. "Okay," replied Wilbur. "You coach me, and I'll spin one. Must be a lot of fun to spin a web. How do I start?" "Take a deep breath," said Charlotte, smiling. Wilbur breathed deeply. "Now climb to the highest place you could get to, like this." Charlotte raced to the top of the doorway. Wilbur scrambled to the top of the manure pile. "Very good," said Charlotte. "Now make an attachment with your spinnerets, hurl yourself into space, and let out a drag line as you go down." Wilbur hesitated for a moment, and then jumped out into the air. He glanced hastily behind to see if a piece of rope was following him to check his fall, but nothing seemed to be happening in his rear, and the next thing he knew, he landed with a thump. "Oomph," he grunted. Charlotte laughed so hard her web began to sway. "Oh, what did I do wrong?" said the pig when he recovered from his bump. "Nothing," said Charlotte. "It was a nice try." "I think I'll try again," said Wilbur cheerfully. "I believe I need a little piece of string to hold me." The Wilbur walked out to his yard. "You there, Templeton?" he called. The rat poked his head from under the trowel. "Got a little piece of string I could borrow?" asked Wilbur. "I need it to spin a web." "Yes, indeed," replied Templeton, who saved strength. "No trouble at all. Anything to oblige." He crept down into his hole, pushed the goose egg out of the way, and returned with an old piece of dirty white string. Wilbur examined it. "That's just the thing," he said. "Tie one end to my tail, will you, Templeton?" Wilbur crouched low with his thin curly tail towards the rat. Templeton seized the string and passed it around one end of the pig's tail and tied it in 2 half hitches. Charlotte watched in delight. Like Fern, she was truly fond of Wilbur, whose smelly pen and stale food attracted the flies that she needed. And she was proud to see that he was not a quitter and willing to try to spin a web again. While the rat and the spider and the little girl watched, Wilbur climbed again to the top of the manure pile, full of energy and hope. "Everybody watch!" he cried. And summoning all his strength, he threw himself into the air head first. The string trailed behind him, but as he had neglected to fasten the other end to anything, it really didn't do any good. Wilbur landed with a thud, crushed and hurt. Tears came to his eyes. Templeton grinned. Charlotte just sat quietly. There he goes. After a little bit, she spoke. You can't spin a web, Wilbur, and I advise you to put the idea out of your mind. You lack two things needed for spinning a web. What are they? Asked Wilbur sadly. You lack a set of spinnerets, and you lack the know-how. But cheer up. You don't need a web. Zuckerman supplies you with 3 big meals a day. Why would you worry about trapping food? Wilbur sighed. You're just ever so much more cleverer and brighter than I am, Charlotte. I guess I was just trying to show off. Serves me right. Templeton untied a string and took it back to his home, and Charlotte returned to weaving. You needn't feel too badly, Wilbur, she said. Not many creatures can spin webs. Even men aren't as good as it as spiders, although they think they're pretty good. They'll try anything. Did you ever hear of the Queensboro Bridge? Wilbur shook his head. Is it a web? Sort of, replied Charlotte. But do you know how long it took men to build it? 8 whole years. My goodness, I would have starved to death waiting that long. I can make a web in a single evening. What do people catch on the Queensboro Bridge? Bugs? Asked Wilbur. No, said Charlotte. They don't catch anything. They just keep trotting back and forth across the bridge, thinking there's something better on the other side. If they hang head down at the top of the thing and wait quietly, maybe something good would come along. But no, with men it's rush, 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 rush every minute. I'm glad I'm a centenary spider. What does centenary mean? Asked Wilbur. It means I sit still a good part of the time and I don't go wandering all over creation. I know a good thing when I see it. My web is a good thing. I stay put and wait for what comes. Gives me a chance to think. I guess I'm like that too, said the pig. I have to hang around here whether I want to or not. Do you know where I'd really like to be this evening? Where? In a forest looking for beech nuts and truffles and delectable roots and pushing leaves aside with my wonderfully strong nose, searching and sniffing along the ground, smelling, smelling, smelling. You smell just the way you are, remarked the lamb who had just walked in. I can smell you from here. You're the smelliest creature in the place. Wilbur hung his head. His eyes grew wet with tears. Charlotte noticed his embarrassment. She spoke sharply to the lamb. You let Wilbur alone, she said. He has a perfect right to smell, considering his surroundings. You're no bundle of sweet peas yourself. Furthermore, you were interrupting a very pleasant conversation. What were we just talking about, Wilbur, when we were so rudely interrupted? Oh, I don't remember, said Wilbur. It doesn't matter. Let's not talk any more for a while, Charlotte. I'm getting sleepy. You go ahead and finish your web, and I'll just lie here and watch you. It's a lovely evening. Wilbur stretched out on his side. Twilight settled over the Zuckerman's barn and a feeling of peace. Fern knew it was almost supper time, but she couldn't bear to leave. Swallows passed on silent wings in and out of the doorways, bringing food to their young ones. From across the road a bird sang, "Whip-poor-will, whip-poor-will." Lurvy sat under an apple tree and lit his pipe, and the animals sniffed the familiar smell of strong tobacco. Wilbur heard the trill of the tree toad and the occasional slamming of the kitchen door. All of these sounds made him feel comfortable and happy, for he loved life and he loved to be part of the world on a summer evening. But as he laid there, he remembered what the old sheep had told him, and the thought of death came to him, and he began to tremble with fear. "Charlotte," he said softly. "Yes, Wilbur?" "I don't want to die." "Of course you don't," said Charlotte in a comforting voice. "I just love it here in the barn," said Wilbur. "I love everything about this place." "Of course you do," said Charlotte. "We all do." The goose appeared, followed by her 7 goslings. They thrust their little necks out and kept out a musical whistling, like a tiny troop of pipers. Wilbur listened to the sound with love in his heart. "Charlotte," he said. "Yes," said the spider. Were you serious when you promised you would keep them from killing me? I've never been more serious in my life. I'm not going to let you die, Wilbur. How are you going to save me? Asked Wilbur, whose curiosity was very strong on this point. Can you blame him? I'd be curious too. Well, said Charlotte vaguely, I don't really know, but I'm working on a plan. That's wonderful, said Wilbur. How is the plan coming, Charlotte? Have you gotten very far with it? Is it coming along pretty well? Wilbur was trembling again, but Charlotte was cool and collected. Oh, it's coming all right, she said lightly. The plan is still in its early stages and hasn't completely shaped up yet, but I'm working on it. When do you work on it? Begged Wilbur. When I'm hanging head down at the top of my web. That's when I do my thinking, because then all the blood is in my head. I'd only be too glad to help in any way I can. Oh, I'll work it out alone, said Charlotte. I can think better if I'm alone. All right, said Wilbur. Don't fail to let me know if there's anything I could do to help, no matter how slight. Well, replied Charlotte, you must try to build yourself up. I want you to get plenty rest and stop worrying. Never hurry and never worry. Chew your food thoroughly and eat every bit of it, except you must leave just enough for Templeton. Well, that's generous, isn't it? Gain weight and stay fit. That's the way you can help. Keep fit and don't lose your nerve. Do you think you understand? Yes, I understand, said Wilbur. Go along to bed then, said Charlotte. Sleep is important. Wilbur trotted over to the darkest corner of his pen and threw himself down. He closed his eyes. In another minute he spoke. Charlotte, he said. Yes, Wilbur. May I go out to my trowel and see if I left any of my supper? I think there's just a tiny bit of mashed potato. Very well, said Charlotte, but I want you in bed again without delay. Wilbur started to race to his yard. Slowly, slowly, said Charlotte. Never hurry and never worry. Wilbur checked himself and crept slowly to his trowel. He found a bit of potato and chewed it carefully, swallowed it, and walked back to bed. He closed his eyes and was silent for a while. Charlotte, he said in a whisper. Yes? May I get a drink of milk? I think there's a few drops of milk left in my trowel. No, the trowel is dry, and I want you to go to sleep. No more talking. Close your eyes. Go to sleep. Wilbur shut his eyes. Fern got up from her stool and started for home, her mind full of everything she had seen and heard. Good night, Charlotte, said Wilbur. Good night, Wilbur. There was a pause. Good night, Charlotte. Good night, Wilbur. Good night. Good night. It's almost a little reminder of how young Wilbur is, because him going to bed reminds me a lot of a little kid going to bed, where they keep trying to find excuses to get out of bed. They need a cup of water, they want a cookie, read me one more story. Kind of feel that's like what Wilbur was doing, and Charlotte's playing the role of the mother and keeps sending him back to bed. So Wilbur's a little anxious to hear Charlotte's plan. You know, he kept asking her questions. Well, when do you work on it? Can I help? He's showing that he's anxious. And you can't blame him. I would be anxious too. Charlotte, though, is staying nice and calm about it. She says she's thinking. And in her advice to Wilbur, we see it's a little bit of her personality. She says never hurry and never worry. And that's kind of how she acts. She's not hurrying. She's not anxious like Wilbur is. She's very calm and collected. She's like, don't worry about it. I'm thinking of something. You just do what you do. So her advice and her personality are kind of one and the same in this chapter. Now, they talked about the Queensboro Bridge in this chapter. You know that's a real bridge, right? And we actually live pretty close to it. Maybe you can Google the Queensboro Bridge to take a peek at what it looks like. But it's a real bridge that she's talking about. Anyway, thank you for joining me again, friends, reading more of Charlotte's Web and talking about the characters. I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.